Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of Actually Diet Art by Science, and I'm very excited to present this episode 0, if you will, of my experiments I've been doing for part of my thesis project. So this video is episode 0 for a particular reason. One is I have a tendency to ramble if you have watched any of my videos. And even though I'm usually quite organized and I try to stick to a particular topic, when you've been researching something for, I don't know, 4 years, and suddenly, if you've been researching something suddenly for 4 years, you have a lot to say about it. But not everyone is enthusiastic about your research project as you are, otherwise they would be doing it. So for this video, what I want to do is get some crowd feedback about the format. So first, would you like shorter or longer episodes? So if you are looking more for less than 10 minutes, maybe closer to the 5-minute range, let me know. If you're sort of like, oh, I could do 10 to 20 minutes, also let me know. It'd probably still be closer to like 10 to 15 because even I don't want to listen to myself talk for that long. And also makes the editing process so much more hectic. But I will do it if you want those longer videos, because each topic will be focused around some aspect of my research and part of the experiment that I did. And depending on how short or long the video is will help me understand how much detail, how little detail I'll need to put into the video so that the length is justified. And I'm trying to make sure that I don't cram too much in, because I am aware that not everyone in the audience has been able to read everything that I have, and my knowledge has been building up substantially over the last 4 years. So that's a lot to take in, even in a 20-minute video. So I don't want to do that. But I wanted to show off some of the things that I would like to discuss in the future for this Iron Age Textiles series. And probably the first episode I will discuss what experimental archaeology is and how I think this is different than what crafters do in terms of experimenting. So it has to do with how things stand up under critique. If you're doing it from a craftsperson point of view, where you're trying to explore more or learn more, you don't necessarily have to follow the same rigors as in academia. But if you're doing experimental archaeology, it's important that you have, you know, a variable that you change to test for, because you can't reconstruct past environments. And so it's a little bit challenging if you try to do too much all at once. So it's more like an experimental archaeology program, where you do lots of different kinds of experiments that all kind of build on each other. You know, you change one thing. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you how I got to this point, and unfortunately I didn't bring my original loom weights that I made. But in Iron Age Britain, there's this one particular shape that has caused some sort of contention, where some people think that they're not loom weights and other people do, and then also there's an idea that, well, it can't be a loom weight over a certain amount in mass, and others say that it can. And we have archaeological evidence suggesting that heavy loom weights existed in the past, particularly in the Iron Age. But also we have contemporary examples, as in the Norwegian weavers during Marta Hoffman's research. So partially this is an exploration for me so that I understand more, but also it fits within experimental programs that have been conducted elsewhere. So I kind of took that as a jumping off point. So there's a lot of criticisms, a lot of, well, we don't know this or we don't know that. And there's only a point in which you can understand more about the world by theorizing about it. So because physics exists, our brains don't always work out how things operate in physical space because our brains aren't thinking through physics that way. So we get a lot of fantasies developed, and so by testing through experimental methods in archaeology, we can understand a little bit more about the physical limitations of the world. So one of them was a number of threads per loom weight and whether a heavy loom weight could support fine threads. And I did a pilot, a stage 0 or maybe stage 1 of 2 experiment where I investigated this idea about number of threads per loom weight and the amount of tension per loom weight, and the fact that in Iron Age Britain we don't really talk about wool, or of course we do. What am I saying? In Iron Age Britain we don't usually talk about linen, we always talk about wool because suddenly sheep are everywhere. And why not? Because they're so cute. But it's an important fiber that we have a very long history using. It was mostly bast, tree, plant type fibers that we used before we started using animal-based ones. And in some parts of the world, plant fibers predominated, even when other wool fibers or animal fibers were available. So it's important to keep linen for me in this discussion. So I thought, well, let's see what linen can do. And then I did an experiment for a conference at the start of last year, and it was kind of playing with this idea of loom weight, shape, and mass. And so I created a very simple experiment to say, well, could they? Could they function on a loom? And I think they're quite effective. But it was a scaled down version because I was using a small loom and I didn't want to break my supervisor's loom. So that's not going to be too useful. So instead I decided to scale up the experiment, and then I came up with this heavy loom weight. And they kind of tessellate because they're triangles, and that kind of makes sense to me. But these are about 2,000 grams, and they're modeled off of a generalized form from one of my sites, Danebury. But you'll see these pretty commonly in Iron Age Britain, so it's not just my sites are being weird, it's that they're common enough, but again, it's that contention. Well, they're 2,000 grams, that's quite heavy, especially if you compare that to Bronze Age Mediterranean ones, which are probably topping out at 400 grams. And even during the Anglo-Saxon period, you usually don't see them more than 800 grams. So 2,000 grams is quite a jump. So they've been called a variety of things, which I will get into in the future. And then, probably the coolest and most contentious of all are these. And actually I have 2 of these made, and I think I may have mentioned these in a previous video, but essentially these are associated with weaving, and they're often called weaving combs, but we don't know for sure because there's been very limited testing on this and different kinds of analyses which haven't been performed to understand truly what their function is. So when I decided I wanted to study textile production, it wasn't just one thing or one aspect. I wanted to look at the collection. So for me that was loom weight spindle whorls. These long-handled combs and needles, to understand what they do on their own, or what kinds of things that they can do as their own item. But then pulling together how all of these tools can be used as a sequence, and understanding how different fabrics might look, or how they might function, or just trying to see how all these different elements can work together instead of how we usually characterize them, which is as an individual type or by material. All the clay items or all the chalk items. It's important to understand how they work together regardless of what they're called or what material they're made out of. It's to understand their function. And that's challenging. So I did 40-something thousand words for my thesis before I started working on this particular project, and I think the max is about 80,000. So you could say roughly half my thesis research went into fueling this experiment, and I've just taken down the loom this morning. That's that was a big thing because it was taking up the entire room, and I do have footage, so you will see how I was weaving in a later video in the series. But I created some samples, and these have just been washed. I haven't done any processing to them yet. And if you follow me actually on Instagram, you've probably already seen this example where I did an Iron Age flat fell seam. So these are all based in research, and for me, having kind of created this using Iron Age technology, using Iron Age approximate tools, I mean, I wasn't actually allowed to use the tools themselves, so I had to make my own that would suffice. And I did use a couple of proxies where I wasn't interested in that particular variable. So if I started with a known constant that I can get regularly, then I can check other variables. So it's really helped me texture what I know about Iron Age technology in terms of how woven cloth is made. So it's kind of like a game changer in the way that I think, and it occurred to me, and I'll probably talk about this more as I go on, as a maker, you sort of, I guess maybe because I've done a lot of this research and experiment stuff with expertly dyed before going on and doing more higher education, like I understood how to do good research, how to do good experimentation, but also because I had this 4-year interim, and I've learned quite a lot from the academic side, well, coming back to it, thinking through about what motivated me previously, sort of what was my identity as a crafter doing to influence how I understood my materials, or why I worked with this or worked with that, or how I described things to you guys, because now that I know more of the academic side, looking through the perspective of the craftsperson, I can actually pinpoint now why I was thinking this, why I'm not completely crazy. But it also informed me how working through problems by doing stuff has been my go-to my entire life, and I never would have known this, of course, had I not been able to get to this level and have a lot of self-reflections of myself, because I don't think most people just record their daily lives. It's been a rare opportunity to understand why I can't think until I have something in my hands. I've been crafting, I've been knitting, I've been stitching. I can think so much better because I've engaged with this. And even though I can't say, well, this is what they were doing in the Iron Age, it is a suggestion based on all the principles being in place. And technically, from the tools point of view, you could produce all of this in the Iron Age. So I didn't do anything completely crazy, but it's still not what they did in the Iron Age. We can't go that far. But when I was struggling with some things, I just thought through with crafts in my hand. So I've been knitting some stuff lately. So by thinking through these crafts, it has allowed me the opportunity to think better about my academic problems. Why this? Oh, okay, well if you use it like this, actually, I had a lot of those moments during this whole experience. But anyway, so that's a little preview of the tools that I did use and some of the like format options that we have. It is going to be a blend of like the academic background and the experimental part, so that people who are interested in increasing the way that they do their experiments, so that they're not just doing something that's fun or something for reenactment, but something that's maybe more derived from archaeological evidence or historical evidence, following principles that help you understand and build, rather than, oh, well, that was nice. So we're talking about repeatability and how you can sort of convey this to other audiences so that you can begin building up collective knowledge. So believe it or not, there are reenactors out there who do very much similar things that I do, but they kind of get put into this catch-all because academics aren't always keen to use the help of reenactors, which is a bit of a shame because I know that there are some out there who are really, really trying. But the paywall with academia has kind of prevented people from getting this information, but these principles can be applied to any body of knowledge. If you have a site that you go to and you help dig and you have access to some of the collection, there's nothing stopping you from taking the principles that I will share with you through the series and then apply to your sample. So it's always going to be a tentative approach, but as long as you do things with very clear objectives and aims and you record everything, it's not bad science. Whether or not an academic will actually use it is, you know, whatever. You've done it, you've enjoyed it, you've shared it, you've contributed something, and so that should be celebrated rather than ignored, if you get what I mean. Anyway, so if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And so I keep hearing about this bell. If you click the bell, then you'll also be notified when I have a new video. And if you could, at the very least, post in the comments below to let me know what type of format you're looking for, a short one or a long one. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!